The grand hall of the Carlisle estate shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers, casting prismatic reflections across polished marble floors and gilded walls. It was a night of opulence, where the city's elite gathered to celebrate the latest acquisition of Vanessa Carlisle's husband, a towering business magnate whose wealth seemed endless. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfumes and the soft murmur of champagne glasses clinking. Yet beneath the glittering surface, a rigid social hierarchy held the room in an unspoken grip. Vanessa Carlisle moved through the crowd like a queen surveying her court. Tall and impeccably styled, she wore a sapphire gown that hugged her slender frame, her hair perfectly coiffed, lips painted a sharp red that matched her incisive tongue. Her eyes, sharp and cool, scanned the guests as if measuring their worth against her own. To those who knew her, Vanessa was the embodiment of entitlement and arrogance, a woman who wielded her social power with ruthless precision. Tonight was no different. At the periphery of the ballroom, away from the admiring gazes and whispered compliments, stood Amina. She was Vanessa's maid, a quiet presence in a neatly pressed uniform. The soft rustle of her movements was barely noticeable against the backdrop of laughter and music. Amina's skin gleamed with a natural warmth under the dim light, her eyes steady and observant as she moved swiftly between tasks. She was the invisible thread holding the evening's seamless facade together. Yet, in the world of the Carlisle mansion, she was expected to remain unseen, unheard, and unquestioning. As Vanessa swept past the guests with practiced grace, she spotted Amina arranging crystal flutes on a silver tray near the grand staircase. A cruel smile flickered across her lips. She stepped closer, voice dripping with condescension. "Amina, darling, are you sure those glasses aren't too delicate for your clumsy hands? It would be a shame to ruin the perfect image of this party with a shattered glass or two." The words hung in the air like a sudden chill. Amina's hand froze mid-motion, the delicate flute trembling slightly. Around them, a few heads turned, the hum of conversation dipping as the tension rippled outward. Vanessa's laughter, light and mocking, filled the space. "I mean, you really should be careful. It's hard to keep up when you don't have the same upbringing." Amina swallowed the sting of the insult, her eyes lowering in a gesture of submission ingrained by years of servitude. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, caught between the spectacle of Vanessa's dominance and the discomfort of witnessing such blatant disdain. Some shifted awkwardly, pretending to check their phones or adjust their cufflinks. Others whispered furtively among themselves, unsure whether to intervene or remain silent. Vanessa allowed the moment to stretch, savoring the power she wielded so effortlessly. "Honestly, I don't know why my husband insists on keeping you around. You're little more than background noise, aren't you? It's not like you have the sophistication to understand the company you keep." Amina's fingers clenched momentarily around the tray, knuckles whitening, but her face remained composed. She had learned long ago that dignity was a shield stronger than any words of retort. Her silence spoke volumes, a quiet defiance that simmered beneath the surface. Vanessa, however, took her silence as submission and turned away, her heels clicking authoritatively against the marble. Once Vanessa had moved on, Amina exhaled slowly, steadying herself. The guests began to murmur softly again, the spell of discomfort breaking. Yet the damage was done. The line between the privileged and the servants was drawn sharper than ever that evening, the invisible barriers reinforced by Vanessa's cruelty. In the kitchen, away from the glittering spectacle, the staff exchanged glances filled with unspoken empathy. Amina's co-workers offered fleeting smiles of solidarity, their shared experiences weaving a silent sisterhood. Though none spoke openly about the humiliation, the collective weight of such moments shaped their daily existence. Outside the mansion's grand windows, the city lights twinkled like distant stars, indifferent to the struggles cast in the shadows of wealth. Amina's mind drifted beyond the estate's walls, to the neighborhood she called home, a place vibrant with life, where community meant more than status or silver spoons. There, her friends and family embraced her not for the uniform she wore, but for the strength and pride she carried within. Vanessa, meanwhile, returned to the center of attention, her laughter resuming with renewed vigor as she regaled guests with stories of high society conquests and business triumphs. To her, the world was neatly divided into those who belonged and those who did not. She wielded her arrogance like a weapon, a shield against any challenge to her carefully constructed reign. Yet, beneath her polished exterior, a flicker of insecurity sometimes whispered, a fear that without her status and wealth, she was nothing. But such thoughts were quickly buried beneath layers of entitlement and disdain, masked by the sharp edges of her personality. The evening wore on, the party a swirling tempest of power plays and social performances. Amina moved among the shadows, her presence unnoticed by most, but deeply aware of every whispered word and sidelong glance. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that contrasted starkly with Vanessa's brazen arrogance, a reminder that true strength often resided in the unseen. As the night deepened, the divide between mistress and maid, privilege and perseverance, became a silent current running beneath the surface of the Carlisle estate. The guests toasted to success and fortune, unaware that within the walls of their glittering world, the seeds of change were quietly beginning to take root. The music swelled softly as the party reached its peak, voices mingling in a hazy symphony of laughter and polite conversation. Vanessa Carlisle, radiant in her sapphire gown, stood near the grand piano, commanding the room with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. The guests, a carefully curated collection of society's upper crust, hung on her every word, or at least pretended to. Yet, beneath the sparkling surface of the evening, an undercurrent of discomfort had begun to ripple through the crowd. It was in this charged atmosphere that Vanessa, sensing an audience hungry for spectacle, chose to make her intentions unmistakably clear. Her gaze fixed on Amina, who was quietly replenishing a tray of hors d'oeuvres on a side table, her movements efficient and unobtrusive. A cruel smile tugged at Vanessa's lips as she stepped deliberately toward her maid, drawing the attention of those nearby. "Oh, Amina," Vanessa began, her voice laced with a sweetness that concealed sharp edges. "Do you remember that story I told you about the gala last year? When Mr. Carlyle's business partner brought that charming French designer. I doubt you were paying attention. Then again, concentrating on something so refined might be a challenge for you." Amina's fingers stilled on the platter, the delicate balance of canapes momentarily disrupted. The room's hum quieted as guests turned their heads, curiosity piqued by the unfolding drama. Vanessa's words, though veiled in faux politeness, cut through the festive air like a shard of glass. Vanessa's smile widened, revealing the satisfaction she derived from the moment. "Honestly, it's fascinating how some people manage to get by without much education or sophistication. It's almost admirable in its own way, like watching a child try to mimic an adult." The laughter that followed was thin and forced, a ripple of discomfort spreading among the guests. Some shifted uneasily in their seats. Others exchanged glances that betrayed their unease. The party's polished veneer cracked, exposing the raw nerve of Vanessa's cruelty. Amina kept her gaze lowered, her expression composed but tinged with the quiet humiliation that threatened to rise. Years of experience had taught her the peril of open defiance in such settings, yet the sting of being belittled in front of an audience was a fresh wound each time. She felt the weight of dozens of eyes, some sympathetic, many indifferent, and a few gleefully complicit. Vanessa, sensing the power she wielded, pressed on. "I suppose it's difficult to grasp the nuances of our world when your reality is so limited. It's not your fault, of course, but sometimes one wonders why such positions even exist. Is it charity? Or just a token nod to appearances?" Amina's breath caught briefly, but she steadied herself, refusing to let the venom penetrate deeper. The guests around her were caught in a silent battle between empathy and the ingrained social order that demanded silence. A few younger attendees exchanged furtive looks of irritation, their discomfort a quiet rebellion against the spectacle. The tension was palpable, a fragile thread stretched thin by Vanessa's relentless barbs. Amina's fellow staff members, stationed discreetly nearby, shared glances that spoke volumes, an unspoken acknowledgment of the indignity their colleague endured. Yet, none dared to intervene, bound by the invisible chains of their roles. Vanessa's voice lowered, but the sharpness remained. I do hope you understand your place, Amina. It's not meant to be cruel, just a reminder of the world you inhabit. It's a delicate balance, and stepping out of line could have consequences. Amina swallowed hard, the words reverberating like a warning. The room seemed to hold its breath, the guests reluctant witnesses to the unfolding humiliation. Amina's eyes flicked briefly toward the ornate mirror on the wall, catching her own reflection, calm, composed, yet undeniably marked by the moment. Among the crowd, a few guests exchanged subtle nods, their faces a mixture of sympathy and discomfort. One middle-aged woman, known for her philanthropic efforts, shifted uneasily, her fingers tightening around her glass. A young man beside her, recently invited into the upper echelon through family connections, looked away, embarrassed by the display. Vanessa, oblivious or indifferent to these reactions, reveled in the spotlight. After all, it's easy to forget the rules when you're surrounded by luxury and power. But those rules exist for a reason, don't they? To keep order, to remind us who belongs at the table and who serves at it. Amina's jaw clenched beneath the mask of politeness. The words echoed the harsh realities she navigated daily, a reminder of the invisible walls that separated her from the world of the Carlyles. Yet, within her, a quiet flame of resilience flickered, refusing to be extinguished by such cruelty. As Vanessa turned on her heel, satisfied with her performance, a murmur of whispered conversations spread through the guests. The party's atmosphere had shifted, the earlier glow dimmed by the shadow of the encounter. Some guests looked away, unwilling to confront the uncomfortable truth Vanessa had laid bare. Others exchanged glances that hinted at a brewing unease. Behind the scenes, the household staff regrouped in the service corridors, their faces etched with concern and quiet support. Amina's closest friends among them offered reassuring smiles and gentle touches on her shoulder, a small gesture of solidarity in a world that often demanded silence. The episode lingered in the air like a bitter aftertaste. Vanessa's public humiliation of Amina was more than a moment of cruelty. It was a stark reminder of the entrenched hierarchies that governed their lives. The party continued, the guests attempting to restore the evening's festive mood, but the tension remained, a subtle undercurrent beneath the laughter and clinking glasses. Amina moved through the remainder of the evening with practiced grace, her demeanor unshaken though her spirit tested. Each task she undertook was a quiet act of defiance, an assertion that despite the humiliation, she would continue to serve with dignity and strength. The guests, now more aware of the fragile boundaries between privilege and servitude, began to see the evening in a new light, their perceptions subtly shifting. Vanessa, meanwhile, basked in the temporary triumph of her social dominance, unaware that her words had sown seeds of doubt and reflection among some of the attendees. The walls of the Carlyle estate, once a fortress of unquestioned hierarchy, now held a tension that neither money nor power could easily dispel. As the night wound down, the guests departed in clusters, their conversations tinged with whispers of the evening's unsettling moments. In the quiet aftermath, the divide between Vanessa and Amina remained stark. Yet beneath the surface, the currents of change had begun to stir, hinting at a reckoning yet to come. The early morning sun filtered through the narrow windows of a modest apartment nestled in a bustling neighborhood miles away from the grandeur of the Carlyle estate. The sounds of the city, vendors calling out their wares, children laughing in the streets, the distant hum of traffic, wove a tapestry of life vibrant and unfiltered. Here, in this neighborhood alive with resilience and warmth, Amina found a sanctuary far removed from the rigid social structures that governed her days in servitude. Inside the small living room, the walls adorned with colorful fabrics and photographs of family gatherings. Amina sat with her closest friends. Their faces reflected a shared history of struggle and triumph, each bearing the marks of hard work and unyielding pride. Among them was Marcus, a tall, articulate man whose passion for social justice had made him a respected figure in their community. His eyes, bright with conviction, spoke of battles fought and victories won against the invisible forces that sought to keep people like them confined to the margins. As Amina recounted the previous night's events at the Carlisle mansion, the room grew still, the weight of her story sinking deep into the hearts of those around her. She spoke not with bitterness, but with a quiet strength that commanded attention. Vanessa's words were meant to humiliate, she said softly, but they only remind me why we fight, why we cannot accept the world as it is. Marcus nodded, his hands folded thoughtfully. People like Vanessa thrive on keeping others small, but the more they try to diminish us, the more we must rise. It's not just about us. It's about everyone who's been told they don't belong. The conversation shifted naturally to the broader struggles their community faced: unequal education, limited job opportunities, the daily indignities that chipped away at dignity. Yet, amid the challenges, there was an undeniable spirit of solidarity and hope. Amina's friends shared stories of organizing neighborhood meetings, advocating for better resources, and standing up to local authorities who often turn a blind eye. Amina's gaze settled on Marcus. "Your work with the community center has made a real difference," she remarked. "It's a place where we can build strength, learn, and support each other. It's what keeps me going." Marcus smiled, a flicker of pride shining through. "It's more than a center, it's a movement. And people like you, who carry themselves with such dignity despite everything, are the heart of it." Outside, the city's rhythm pulsed with life, a reminder that beyond the walls of wealth and privilege, a different world thrived, complex, vibrant, and unapologetically alive. Amina felt the contrast keenly. The opulence of the Carlisle estate was a distant echo here, replaced by the tangible struggles and joys of real life. Yet, despite the hardships, there was an authenticity, a connection to community that Vanessa could never understand. As the morning wore on, Amina prepared to leave, her heart fortified by the support of her friends. The events of the previous night still lingered, but they no longer held power over her spirit. Instead, they fueled a determination to challenge the status quo, to carve out a space where respect and equality were not luxuries but rights. Walking through the neighborhood's bustling streets, Amina was greeted warmly by neighbors and acquaintances who recognized her not as a servant, but as a leader and advocate. Children waved, elders nodded in approval, and the air buzzed with a collective energy that transcended individual struggles. Here, she was part of something larger, a community bound by shared dreams and mutual support. Back at the Carlisle estate, the contrast was stark. Vanessa awoke in a suite of silk sheets, her thoughts preoccupied with the evening's events and the subtle shifts she sensed among her guests. Yet, she remained oblivious to the deeper currents stirring beyond her world. The arrogance that defined her existence shielded her from understanding the resilience that thrived just beyond her reach. Meanwhile, Amina's life unfolded in parallel, a testament to strength born from humility and the unwavering belief in a better future. Her journey was not one of wealth or privilege, but of courage and conviction, grounded in the knowledge that dignity could never be dictated by status or birth. As she returned home that evening, Amina carried with her the stories and struggles of her community, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The divide between her world and Vanessa's was vast, but in that distance lay the possibility of change, a hope that the boundaries could one day be bridged by understanding and respect. In the quiet moments before sleep, Amina reflected on the lessons passed down from her grandmother, a healer who had taught her the power of resilience and the importance of standing firm in the face of adversity. Those teachings were a balm for the soul, a reminder that strength often flourished in the most unexpected places. The neighborhood hummed softly outside her window, a living testament to lives intertwined by shared hope and unspoken solidarity. And within that tapestry, Amina found her place, not as a servant defined by others, but as a woman poised to reclaim her narrative, one act of courage at a time. The morning light spilled through the lace curtains of Amina's modest apartment, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden floor. The air was alive with the sounds of the neighborhood stirring awake, vendors setting up stalls, children's laughter echoing down the street, and the distant hum of early traffic. Yet amidst this familiar bustle, Amina's mind was focused and resolute, her spirit stoked by the memories of the previous night's humiliation and the strength drawn from her community. She moved with purpose, preparing for the day ahead, her movements deliberate and calm. The sting of Vanessa Carlisle's public insults still lingered beneath her skin, but Amina refused to let it define her. Instead, she chose a different path, one paved not with anger or retaliation, but with dignity and quiet defiance. As she dressed, Amina's thoughts circled around the guests at the Carlisle party, those who had witnessed Vanessa's cruelty yet remained silent or uncertain. She knew that change often began with awareness, and perhaps, just perhaps, there were seeds of doubt planted in those privileged minds. With this in mind, she crafted a plan, one that required patience and subtlety rather than confrontation. Later that day, Amina found herself in the heart of the city's cultural district, where an art exhibit was opening, a gathering of some of the very elite who had attended the Carlisle party. The event was a stark contrast to her usual world, filled with glittering sculptures and whispered conversations about aesthetics and influence. Yet here, she saw an opportunity. Dressed simply but impeccably, Amina entered the gallery with measured confidence. She carried herself with a grace that belied her station, her eyes scanning the room for familiar faces. A few guests from the party were present, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and polite reserve upon recognizing her. Approaching a small cluster of attendees, Amina began to engage in quiet conversations, her voice steady and composed. She spoke not of the party or Vanessa's insults, but of art and its power to reflect society's truths. Her words were thoughtful, revealing a keen intellect and a perspective shaped by lived experience rather than privilege. Guests listened, some with genuine interest, others with polite skepticism. Yet the effect was undeniable. Amina was no longer invisible, no longer merely a background figure to be dismissed. She was a presence that demanded acknowledgement, her calm defiance unsettling the comfortable assumptions of those around her. Among the listeners was Eleanor Whitman, a prominent socialite known for her philanthropic work and subtle influence within elite circles. Eleanor's eyes met Amina's with a spark of recognition and respect. After the gathering, she approached Amina privately. "I must say, your insights were refreshing," Eleanor remarked, her tone sincere. "It's rare to encounter someone who speaks with such clarity and conviction outside these walls." Amina smiled softly, grateful for the unexpected connection. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. I believe that understanding comes from listening to all voices, not just the loudest or most privileged." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps there is much we can learn from you, and from those whose stories often go unheard." Encouraged by this small victory, Amina continued to cultivate these discreet alliances, planting seeds of awareness among the guests who had once seen her only as a servant. She shared stories of her community's strength, the challenges they faced, and the dignity with which they met adversity. Her words were never confrontational, but carried an undeniable power that chipped away at preconceived notions. Back in the neighborhood, Marcus and other community organizers noticed a subtle change in the conversations they overheard from the city's elite. Whispers of respect and curiosity began to replace the usual dismissiveness. Amina's efforts were quietly bridging worlds, opening doors that had long been sealed shut. Meanwhile, Vanessa remained oblivious to the shifting tides. Her days were consumed by the relentless pursuit of status and control, her interactions laced with the same condescension that had marked the party. She viewed Amina's continued presence with increasing irritation, unable to comprehend the quiet strength that defied her attempts to diminish. In the evenings, Amina would return home, her body weary but her spirit invigorated. She would gather with her friends and neighbors, sharing the small victories and reaffirming their collective resolve. These moments of camaraderie were the fuel that sustained her, a reminder that dignity and courage were not the sole province of the privileged. One afternoon, as Amina walked through a local market, she was approached by a young woman who had attended the Carlisle party. The woman's eyes were wide with admiration and a hint of guilt. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what happened. You didn't deserve that." Amina's smile was gentle but firm. "Thank you. What matters is what we do next, how we choose to respond." The encounter was a testament to the subtle but growing impact of Amina's approach. Through calm and collected defiance, she was not only reclaiming her own narrative but also inspiring others to question the rigid hierarchies that had long defined their world. As days turned into weeks, the ripple effects became more evident. Invitations to small gatherings and community forums began to reach Amina, offering platforms to share her experiences and advocate for change. The walls that once confined her role as a maid were slowly giving way to new possibilities. Yet, with each step forward, Amina remained mindful of the delicate balance she maintained. Her defiance was measured, strategic, not a blaze of rebellion, but a steady flame burning away prejudice and ignorance. It was a path fraught with risk, but illuminated by the unwavering belief that respect and equality were not privileges bestowed, but rights earned through courage and integrity. The Carlisle estate, meanwhile, seemed to grow colder with each passing day. Vanessa's attempts to reassert dominance met with subtle resistance and shifting loyalties. The social landscape was evolving, and even those draped in wealth could not remain untouched by the winds of change. Amina's journey was far from over, but already the quiet power of her presence was reshaping the narrative. Through grace and resilience, she was transforming humiliation into hope, igniting a movement that would challenge the foundations of privilege and demand a new understanding of dignity and respect. The evening air inside the Carlisle estate was thick with anticipation. The grand hall bathed in soft amber light from flickering candelabras. Guests in their finest attire mingled beneath the soaring ceilings, their conversations a low hum punctuated by the occasional clink of crystal glasses. This was another of Vanessa Carlisle's meticulously orchestrated social events, a stage upon which she thrived, wielding her influence like a conductor commanding an orchestra. Yet tonight, the familiar rhythm was about to shift. Amina stood near the edge of the room, her posture poised but unassuming. She wore a simple yet elegant black dress that contrasted with the extravagance around her, her eyes calm and steady as they surveyed the crowd. The memory of Vanessa's public humiliation still lingered, but Amina was no longer content to remain silent or invisible. Tonight, she would speak, not with anger, but with a clarity and grace that would unsettle the carefully maintained order. As Vanessa circulated through the guests, basking in their admiration and whispers of envy, Amina took a deep breath and stepped forward. The murmurs in the room faltered as eyes turned toward her, surprise flickering across the faces of many who had never before truly noticed her presence. The soft sound of her voice, clear and unwavering, drew all attention. "Good evening," Amina began, her tone measured yet imbued with quiet strength. "I would like to share a thought, not as a servant standing at the periphery, but as a woman who believes in the dignity and worth of every person in this room." The guests exchanged glances, some intrigued, others wary. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, a flicker of disbelief crossing her features. She approached, ready to interrupt, but Amina continued, undeterred. "In this room, we celebrate success, wealth, and status. Yet beneath the glitter and gold, there are truths that often go unspoken. I have witnessed moments when those truths break through, when words meant to wound reveal the fragility of the very walls we build around ourselves." A silence settled over the room, the kind that carries the weight of unspoken acknowledgments. Amina's gaze swept the crowd, meeting eyes that flickered with hesitation, curiosity, and something new, reflection. "I do not seek to cast blame or sow division," she said softly, "but I ask that we consider the power of respect and empathy, that we recognize the shared humanity that connects us beyond titles and roles. For it is in our common dignity that true strength lies." The words hung in the air, a gentle challenge to the complacency that had long defined this social sphere. Among the guests, whispers began to ripple, conversations rekindling with a newfound awareness. Some nodded subtly, others looked away, grappling with the discomfort of introspection. Vanessa, momentarily speechless, felt the shifting tide. Her carefully maintained dominance was being questioned not with confrontation, but with an undeniable grace that left her exposed. She opened her mouth to retort, but the words caught, swallowed by the room's changing atmosphere. From across the hall, Eleanor Whitman stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. "Amina speaks with wisdom," she said, her voice carrying the authority of one used to influencing the elite. "Perhaps it is time we listen more closely and reflect on the world beyond our immediate experience." A murmur of agreement followed, the guest's posture shifting from guarded to engaged. The social performance Vanessa had orchestrated was unraveling, replaced by a genuine moment of connection and reckoning. Vanessa's face hardened, a flicker of anger and vulnerability battling beneath her composed exterior. She attempted to regain control, her voice rising with a practiced firmness. "This is a gathering to celebrate achievement and elegance, not to dwell on grievances or social critiques." But the room no longer responded as it once had. The guests' attention remained with Amina and Eleanor, their expressions open to the possibilities the conversation presented. Vanessa's attempts to dominate fell flat, her authority challenged in a way she had not anticipated. Amina's eyes met Vanessa's for a brief moment, steady, unwavering. There was no triumph in her gaze, only the quiet assertion of her worth and the hope for a future where such moments could be commonplace rather than revolutionary. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere softened. Conversations blossomed around themes of inclusion, respect, and the courage it takes to confront uncomfortable truths. The divide between mistress and maid blurred, replaced by a tentative solidarity that hinted at transformation. In the days that followed, the impact of Amina's speech rippled through the social circles connected to the Carlisle estate. Invitations arrived for her to speak at small gatherings, to share a perspective with others who were beginning to question the rigid hierarchies they had long accepted. Vanessa, meanwhile, retreated into a private world of simmering resentment and self-reflection. The encounter had cracked the armor of her invincibility, leaving her to grapple with the realization that power wielded without empathy was unstable. Yet, her journey toward understanding was just beginning, fraught with resistance and denial. For Amina, the night was a turning point, a moment where courage and composure converged to challenge injustice not with force, but with the undeniable power of truth spoken calmly and clearly. It was a testament to the strength that lies in dignity and the possibilities that arise when silence is broken. The Carlisle estate, once a bastion of unyielding class divisions, now stood at the cusp of change. And at its heart, a maid named Amina had shown that respect and courage could illuminate even the darkest corners of privilege and prejudice. The morning after the gathering, the atmosphere within the Carlisle estate was palpably different. A subtle tension lingered in the air, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Vanessa awoke in her lavish bedroom, the sunlight filtering through heavy drapes, casting long shadows that seemed to echo the turmoil within her. The events of the previous evening played over in her mind, each word from Amina's poised speech striking deeper than she cared to admit. In the solitude of her dressing room, Vanessa paced, her perfectly manicured nails tapping a restless rhythm against the marble countertop. The veneer of control she so carefully maintained felt brittle, cracked by the quiet defiance that had blossomed in her presence. The social order she had upheld with such certainty was no longer unchallenged. the guest's shifting attitudes haunted her thoughts. Determined to reclaim her dominance, Vanessa summoned her closest confidant and the estate's social coordinator, Mrs. Langley, to strategize. Their conversation was hushed but urgent, the weight of potential scandal and loss of reputation heavy in every word. "We cannot allow this to undermine the Carlyle name," Vanessa insisted, her voice sharp. "Amina's audacity has emboldened others. We must remind everyone where the boundaries lie." Mrs. Langley nodded, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of doubt. Perhaps a public apology from Miss Carlyle might quell the unrest. It would show humility without conceding too much. Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line. The idea of apologizing felt like defeat, yet the risk of isolation among her peers was a threat she could not ignore. "Very well," she agreed reluctantly. "But it must be carefully worded. Regret for any misunderstanding, nothing more." Meanwhile, word of Amina's speech and the subtle shift in social dynamics had spread beyond the walls of the estate. Among the city's elite, whispers of admiration for Amina's grace and courage mingled with concern over the changing tide. Invitations to salons and philanthropic gatherings began to find their way to her, signaling a newfound respect that was both exhilarating and daunting. Back at the estate, Amina carried herself with quiet confidence, aware of the undercurrents swirling around her. She remained focused on her duties, but the eyes of guests and staff alike held a new recognition, one that transcended her role as a maid. The subtle nods of encouragement from some, the lingering glances from others, all spoke to a transformation underway. One afternoon, as Amina moved through the grand hallway, Vanessa intercepted her. The air between them was charged with unspoken tension. Vanessa's voice was measured but strained. "Amina, I want to speak with you." Amina paused, meeting Vanessa's gaze calmly. "Yes, Mrs. Carlyle." Vanessa's expression flickered, a mixture of frustration and reluctant respect. "Your words at the gathering, they were unexpected. I must admit, they gave me much to consider." Amina inclined her head slightly, maintaining her composure. "I speak only what I believe, ma'am. We all have much to learn when we listen with open hearts." Vanessa hesitated, then continued, "I would like to offer an apology for anything you felt was unfair at the last party. It was not my intention to cause harm." The apology, though cautious, held weight. Amina's lips curved into a subtle, genuine smile. "Thank you, Mrs. Carlyle. That means more than you might realize." The exchange marked a tentative step toward a new understanding, a fragile bridge spanning the divide that had long separated them. Yet beneath the surface, Vanessa wrestled with pride and vulnerability, the journey toward genuine change only just beginning. In the days that followed, Vanessa struggled privately with the bruising of her ego and the implications of Amina's rising presence. She found herself monitoring interactions more closely, attempting to reassert control through subtle maneuvers. Curt instructions to staff, pointed remarks in social settings, and quiet attempts to discredit Amina's growing influence. But each effort met with resilience. Amina's grace and steadfastness only deepened the respect she commanded among guests and colleagues alike. Her community connections brought a fresh perspective to the estate, fostering initiatives that bridged gaps and challenged old prejudices. The household staff, once resigned to rigid hierarchies, began to sense a shift. Conversations grew bolder, and alliances formed across traditional lines. Vanessa's attempts to undermine Amina faltered, often backfiring and isolating her further within the social circle. One evening, as the estate prepared for another gala, Vanessa found herself alone in the drawing room, reflecting on the transformations swirling around her. The power she had wielded so effortlessly now felt elusive, slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. In that quiet moment, she confronted the uncomfortable truth. The world was changing, and with it, her role within it. The path ahead was uncertain and fraught with challenges, but the choice was hers, to resist and risk further isolation, or to embrace the possibility of growth and renewal. Elsewhere, Amina prepared for the evening with a calm determination. She understood the stakes involved, the delicate balance between asserting her dignity and navigating the complexities of privilege. Her journey was one of cautious optimism, fueled by the belief that change was possible when courage met compassion. As guests arrived and the estate buzzed with anticipation, the lines between mistress and maid grew blurred, replaced by a tentative respect forged in the fires of confrontation and reconciliation. The Carlyle household was no longer a stage for unquestioned dominance, but a living testament to the power of grace, resilience, and the courage to challenge the status quo. In the quiet moments between celebrations and duties, both Vanessa and Amina faced their own reflections of past mistakes, present struggles, and the possibilities that lay ahead. Their intertwined stories were a microcosm of a broader transformation, a subtle but profound shift toward empathy and equality. The journey was far from over, but the fragile peace that settled over the estate marked a turning point, a promise that even the most entrenched divisions could begin to heal when met with humility and strength. The grand hall of the Carlyle estate shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers once more, but this evening, the atmosphere carried a different weight. The servants moved with a newfound assurance. The guests lingered with thoughtful expressions, and Vanessa Carlyle herself wore a mask that betrayed both reluctance and a tentative acceptance. The rigid divisions that had long defined the household were softening, and the subtle shifts were beginning to ripple through every corner of the estate. Vanessa stood near the entrance, her posture still regal but less imperious than before. The public apology she had issued at the previous gathering, though forced, had opened a door she had once refused to acknowledge. It was a small but significant crack in the facade of entitlement that had governed her life. Some guests whispered among themselves, noting the change, while others exchanged glances that suggested a reassessment of the social order they had comfortably inhabited. Amina moved through the room with quiet grace, her presence no longer unnoticed or dismissed. Invitations from influential attendees had begun to arrive, offering opportunities that transcended her former role. Tonight, she was both a respected guest and a symbol of resilience, a testament to the power of dignity in the face of adversity. As the evening progressed, conversations sparked around the themes of respect, equality, and the courage it takes to confront ingrained prejudices. Amina found herself engaged in discussions with patrons of the arts, philanthropists, and even some of Vanessa's old acquaintances who had begun to see her in a new light. The barriers that once seemed insurmountable were yielding, replaced by a cautious but genuine curiosity. Vanessa watched from a distance, a complex swirl of emotions crossing her face. Pride, resentment, uncertainty, all mingled in the quiet turmoil beneath her composed exterior. The apology had not been easy, and the subtle loss of unquestioned authority was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, even she could not deny the strength and grace Amina displayed, qualities that challenged her own assumptions and forced a reckoning. Later, as the guests began to disperse, Eleanor Whitman approached Amina with a warm smile. "You have brought something remarkable to this estate," she said sincerely. "Your courage and composure have inspired many, myself included. I hope this is just the beginning." Amina's reply was humble but firm. "Thank you, Mrs. Whitman. Change takes time, but every step forward matters." In the days that followed, the household atmosphere continued to shift. Vanessa, though still grappling with her bruised ego, made tentative efforts to bridge the gap. She extended small courtesies to Amina, invitations to join private discussions, gestures that hinted at a willingness to reconsider old prejudices. Amina, ever mindful of the fragile balance, accepted these overtures with grace, recognizing the importance of fostering understanding even when it came wrapped in hesitation. Her growing confidence inspired others among the staff to speak up, to share their experiences, and to demand respect in ways that had once seemed impossible. The ripple effects spread beyond the estate's walls, reaching the broader community where Amina's advocacy and leadership flourished. Partnerships formed, initiatives launched, and a network of support strengthened the bonds between those striving for equality and recognition. Yet, beneath the surface of progress, challenges remained. Vanessa's internal struggle with change was ongoing, moments of resistance surfacing in private conversations and subtle social maneuvers. The path to genuine transformation was neither linear nor easy, marked by setbacks and moments of doubt. One afternoon, as Amina prepared for a community meeting hosted at the estate, Vanessa approached her privately. The gesture was unexpected, and the tension between them was palpable. "I want to thank you," Vanessa began hesitantly, "for your patience, your strength, and for showing me a different way to see the world." Amina regarded her thoughtfully. "It takes courage to change, Mrs. Carlyle. I hope this is the start of something real." Vanessa nodded, a fragile smile breaking through. "It is. I want it to be." Their exchange marked a turning point, not a resolution, but an opening. The walls that once divided them were beginning to crumble, replaced by tentative bridges built on mutual respect and the shared hope for a better future. As the evening of the community meeting arrived, the estate welcomed guests from diverse backgrounds, neighbors, activists, artists, and patrons alike. The event was a celebration of unity and progress, a testament to what could be achieved when dignity and empathy prevailed over prejudice and division. Amina stood at the forefront, her voice steady as she addressed the crowd. "Tonight, we celebrate not just change, but the courage it requires. We honor the strength found in community and the belief that every person deserves respect." The applause was warm and heartfelt, echoing through the grand hall that had once been a symbol of separation. Vanessa watched from the sidelines, pride and humility mingling in her gaze. The Carlyle estate had transformed, from a fortress of class and cruelty into a beacon of hope and inclusion. The journey was far from complete, but the foundation had been laid by the quiet bravery of a woman who refused to be defined by her circumstances. In the days that followed, the household continued to evolve. Staff and guests alike embraced the new ethos, and the divisions that once seemed insurmountable became opportunities for connection and growth. Vanessa and Amina, once divided by roles and prejudices, now shared a tentative partnership, a recognition that change was possible when met with courage, humility, and a willingness to listen. The story of the Carlyle estate became a testament to the power of dignity and unexpected courage in the face of humiliation, a narrative that would inspire others to stand against injustice and to believe in the possibility of transformation. And as the seasons turned, the estate echoed, not just with the clink of glasses and whispered gossip, but with laughter, conversation, and the vibrant energy of a community united in hope and respect. The quiet transformation rippling through the Carlyle estate had not gone unnoticed by all. Beneath the surface of evolving respect and tentative alliances, Vanessa grappled with a storm of emotions, pride wounded, authority challenged, and an ego bruised in ways she struggled to admit. The fragile peace that had settled between her and Amina was tested in the shadows of whispered doubts and simmering resentment. In the solitude of her private study, Vanessa pored over letters and invitations, her mind restless. The public apology and her attempts at rapprochement had softened some edges, but the subtle shifts in household dynamics gnawed at her sense of control. The staff, once deferential, now exchanged knowing glances. Some guests regarded Amina with newfound respect that bordered on admiration. Unable to accept this quietly undermining change, Vanessa resolved to reassert her dominance, not with overt confrontation, but through a series of calculated, subtle maneuvers designed to isolate Amina and remind her of her place. The first move came during a morning briefing with the household staff. Vanessa's tone was clipped as she announced new, stricter protocols. "I expect all staff to adhere more closely to their duties. There will be no exceptions, regardless of recent distractions." Her eyes lingered pointedly on Amina, who met the gaze with steady calm. Later, Vanessa privately conferred with the estate's manager, instructing him to limit Amina's responsibilities and exclude her from certain social events. We must contain this before it spreads further, she warned. Allowing her influence to grow threatens the very order of this household. Despite these efforts, Amina remained composed, her dignity unshaken by the subtle attempts to sideline her. She continued to perform her duties with grace and efficiency, earning quiet support from colleagues who admired her resilience. The more Vanessa tightened her grip, the more isolated she became, her efforts backfiring as whispers of sympathy for Amina grew louder. One afternoon, Vanessa encountered Amina in the kitchen corridor. Her voice was low but edged with icy determination. "I suggest you remember your position here," she warned. "Respect is earned, yes, but it can also be revoked." Amina met her with unwavering eyes. "Respect is not a privilege to be granted or taken away, Mrs. Carlyle. It is a right we all share." Vanessa's lips pressed into a thin line, the words a sting she could neither deny nor retaliate against openly. The encounter left her simmering with frustration, fueling further efforts to undermine Amina's standing. Behind the scenes, Vanessa engaged in discreet conversations with influential guests and socialites, planting seeds of doubt about Amina's growing presence. She questioned the propriety of allowing a servant such influence, subtly casting aspersions on Amina's character and intentions. Yet, these attempts faltered in the face of Amina's steadfast integrity and the support she garnered from unexpected quarters. Eleanor Whitman and other allies quietly countered Vanessa's insinuations, emphasizing Amina's contributions and the importance of inclusivity. The estate's staff began to sense the tension mounting. Some hesitated, caught between loyalty to Vanessa and admiration for Amina's courage. Quiet conversations unfolded in break rooms and service corridors, the undercurrent of change clashing with the remnants of entrenched hierarchy. Amid this growing friction, a rival businessman allied with Vanessa's social circle saw opportunity. Seeking to exploit the internal discord, he launched a campaign to discredit the Carlyle household's reputation, aiming to weaken Vanessa's influence and destabilize her standing. The attack came in the form of whispered rumors and veiled accusations spread through social channels and media outlets. Vanessa, already embattled within her own circle, faced mounting pressure as the scandal threatened to overshadow the estate's recent strides toward inclusivity. In the face of this external threat, Vanessa's attempts to isolate Amina began to unravel. The household, recognizing the common challenge, rallied together. Staff members who had once kept to themselves stepped forward, offering support and solidarity. Amina, whose quiet strength had become a beacon for many, stood at the center of this unexpected alliance. She coordinated responses, engaged with community leaders, and leveraged her growing network to counter the rumors and restore the estate's reputation. Vanessa found herself increasingly isolated, her social maneuvers thwarted not only by Amina's resilience, but by the shifting loyalties within her own circle. The power she had clung to so tightly was eroding, replaced by a new dynamic rooted in respect and collective strength. One late evening, alone in her drawing room, Vanessa confronted the bitter truth she had long resisted. Her attempts to undermine Amina only deepened her own isolation. The walls she had built to protect her status were crumbling, and the future she feared was unfolding before her eyes. Yet, within that moment of reckoning, a seed of possibility took root. The realization that true power was not derived from domination, but from connection and understanding began to surface, fragile but undeniable. Elsewhere, Amina prepared for the challenges ahead with unwavering resolve. She understood that the path toward equality was fraught with resistance, but she drew strength from the community that had rallied around her and the quiet courage that had carried her this far. The Carlyle estate stood on the precipice of profound change, a battleground where old prejudices clashed with emerging ideals. The outcome remained uncertain, but the courage to confront injustice and the bonds forged in adversity promised a future where dignity and respect could prevail. In the quiet moments before dawn, the estate breathed with tension and hope, a testament to the enduring struggle for equality and the unyielding spirit of those who dare to challenge the status quo. The first light of dawn filtered softly through the heavy curtains of the Carlisle estate, casting a gentle glow over the ornate furnishings that had witnessed decades of unchallenged privilege. Yet, within these walls, a quiet revolution was underway, one not marked by grand gestures, but by subtle shifts in understanding and the slow dismantling of long-held prejudices. Vanessa Carlyle sat alone in her study, the weight of recent months pressing heavily upon her. The confrontations, the whispered doubts, the public challenges to her authority, all had chipped away at the fortress of entitlement she had so carefully constructed. The bruises to her pride were deep, yet beneath the surface, a flicker of self-awareness began to take root. For the first time, Vanessa allowed herself to reflect honestly on the forces that had shaped her worldview. The expectations of society, the fear of losing control, the need to protect a fragile sense of identity. She recognized how these had blinded her to the humanity of those she had dismissed and demeaned, particularly Amina. Her thoughts drifted to recent conversations, the tentative apologies exchanged, and the courage Amina had shown in speaking truth with grace. Vanessa understood now that change required more than superficial gestures. It demanded humility, empathy, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. Across the estate, Amina prepared for the day with a quiet determination. The battles she had faced were far from over, but she carried the strength of her community and the knowledge that her dignity could not be diminished by prejudice or fear. Invitations to speak at forums and gatherings had increased, and she was becoming a voice not just for herself, but for many who had been silenced. Her growing confidence inspired those around her, both within the household and beyond. Staff members who had once accepted their roles without question began to assert their worth, empowered by Amina's example. The estate was no longer a bastion of rigid hierarchy, but a place where respect and collaboration took tentative root. Vanessa, too, sought to participate in this transformation. She initiated conversations with staff, attended community events alongside Amina, and began to support initiatives aimed at bridging divides. The process was uncomfortable and fraught with setbacks, but each step forward was a testament to her evolving understanding. One afternoon, Vanessa and Amina met privately in the estate's sunlit conservatory. The air was warm, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the soft hum of life beyond the glass walls. Vanessa's expression was earnest, tinged with vulnerability. "Amina," she began, "I want to thank you, not just for your patience, but for opening my eyes. There's so much I've taken for granted, and I realize now how much work remains, not just for you or me, but for all of us." Amina met her gaze steadily. "Change begins with recognition, Mrs. Carlyle. It's not easy, but it's necessary. I believe we can build something better here, together." Their conversation marked a turning point, a fragile but genuine partnership forged from mutual respect and a shared commitment to growth. It was not an erasure of the past, but a foundation upon which a new future could be built. In the wider community, the ripple effects were palpable. Collaborations between the estate and local organizations flourished, addressing issues of education, employment, and social justice. The narrative of division began to give way to stories of unity and shared purpose. Yet, the road ahead was still winding. Old habits, biases, and fears surfaced in unexpected ways, challenging both Vanessa and Amina to remain steadfast. Moments of doubt and frustration tested their resolve, but their growing alliance provided strength and perspective. Within the household, the atmosphere continued to evolve. The staff embraced new roles and responsibilities, their voices increasingly heard and valued. The guests who once viewed the estate as a symbol of exclusivity now witnessed a community in transformation, one that honored dignity over status. Vanessa's journey of self-reflection deepened. She sought counsel, read widely, and engaged in dialogues that expanded her understanding beyond the privileged bubble she had inhabited. The process was humbling, revealing the complexities of power and the necessity of accountability. Amina, too, grew in her leadership, balancing advocacy with diplomacy. She remained grounded by the support of her community and the teachings of her grandmother, who had instilled in her the importance of resilience and compassion. Together, their intertwined paths became emblematic of a broader social awakening, a testament to the power of courage, empathy, and the willingness to change. The Carlisle estate, once a fortress of division, was becoming a beacon of hope. As the sun set over the city, casting golden hues across the horizon, Vanessa and Amina stood side by side on the estate's terrace. The air was filled with the promise of possibility, the challenges of the past acknowledged, but no longer defining their future. In that shared moment, the barriers of class and prejudice seemed to dissolve, replaced by the enduring bonds of respect and shared humanity. The journey was ongoing, but the foundation had been laid. Their story was no longer one of conflict and division, but of transformation and hope, a narrative that would inspire others to confront injustice, embrace change, and believe in the power of unity. And as the stars emerged in the twilight sky, the Carlisle estate stood as a living testament to the strength found in courage, compassion, and the relentless pursuit of a better tomorrow. The grand ballroom of the Carlisle estate was transformed, not just by the soft glow of chandeliers or the delicate arrangements of fresh flowers, but by the palpable sense of unity that infused the air. Tonight's gathering was unlike any before, a celebration of the journey taken, the battles fought, and the bridges built between worlds once thought irreconcilable. Vanessa stood near the entrance, her posture more relaxed than ever, a genuine smile playing at the corners of her lips. Gone was the icy detachment that had once defined her presence. In its place was a warmth born of reflection and growth. Her eyes scanned the room, resting briefly on familiar faces, friends, allies, and those who had once been strangers but were now part of a shared community. Amina moved gracefully through the crowd, her black dress catching the light as she exchanged greetings and laughter. The dignity she carried was no longer a silent defiance, but a celebrated strength. Around her, the staff and guests mingled freely, the old barriers of class and status dissolving into genuine connection. The evening's program began with speeches that honored the courage and compassion that had propelled the transformation. Eleanor Whitman spoke eloquently about the power of empathy and the necessity of challenging entrenched prejudices. Her words resonated deeply, weaving through the crowd like a gentle call to action. Vanessa then stepped forward, her voice steady and sincere. Tonight, we gather not just to celebrate, but to acknowledge the changes that have reshaped not only this estate, but our hearts and minds. We have learned that true wealth lies not in possessions or power, but in the bonds we forge and the respect we show one another. Amina followed, her speech a heartfelt reflection on the strength found in community and the courage required to stand against injustice. This journey has shown us that dignity is not bound by status, and that every voice deserves to be heard. Together, we can build a future where understanding bridges divides, and where compassion guides our actions. The applause was warm and sustained, filling the room with a sense of hope and shared purpose. Throughout the evening, stories were exchanged, of hardships overcome, lessons learned, and the unexpected friendships that had blossomed in the most unlikely places. As the night deepened, the estate's grand hall echoed not with the rigid formalities of the past, but with music and laughter that transcended social divides. Guests and staff danced side by side, their movements a joyful testament to the bonds now uniting them. Outside, the city lights twinkled like distant promises, mirroring the bright future unfolding within the estate's walls. The McGee Foundation, born from this collective awakening, announced its mission to preserve traditional healing practices and support communities often overlooked by society's gaze. Vanessa and Amina stood together near the terrace, watching as the celebration swirled around them. The journey had been arduous, marked by moments of pain and doubt, but now it culminated in a legacy of hope and healing. Vanessa's voice was soft but resolute. I never imagined this path when I first met you. Amina, you have taught me that true strength is found in humility and courage. Amina smiled, her eyes reflecting the stars above. And you have shown that change is possible when we dare to listen and to grow. Our story is just one of many, but it carries the message that no one should be invisible or unheard. Their hands met in a quiet gesture of solidarity, a symbol of the new era they had helped usher in. A future where class and prejudice no longer dictated worth, and where love and bravery overcame even the most daunting challenges. The celebration continued into the early hours, a living testament to the power of unexpected courage and the enduring strength of human connection. The Carlisle estate, once a symbol of division, had been reborn as a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the promise of a better tomorrow. As dawn approached, the guests departed with hearts uplifted and spirits renewed, carrying with them the lessons of the night that would be remembered as the turning point. A moment when dignity triumphed over humiliation, and when the bonds forged in adversity created a legacy that would inspire generations to come. In this transformed world, miracles were no longer the domain of fairy tales, but were born from compassion, resilience, and the unwavering belief that together, humanity could overcome even the greatest of challenges. If you love the story, like the video and subscribe.